L'organisation d'un débat demande beaucoup de travail. Mais heureusement, la collègue de Rick, Eleanor Miller, a rejoint notre équipe.
Rick's colleague, Eleanor Miller, is with us, along with the long-term Conservative planner. During our first meeting, we agreed that it was important for the debate to inform, engage, and give more dynamic life to the party. We wanted all Canadians to be involved in the process. We wanted to encourage and engage as many people as possible in this process. And we wanted to engage both former and current members and new members.
At our party's peak in 2020, we had just over 262,000 members. Today, the Conservative Party of Canada has more than 678,000 members. And so far this year alone, we've signed up 400,000 people who have never been members of our party before. This is an extraordinary result, and it clearly shows that Canadians are unhappy with the government and they want change. Today's third and final debate will give all those who have not yet voted for our new leader one last chance to hear from those who wish to be our next party leader and the next Prime Minister of Canada. Our members asked for a third debate to help them decide who to cast their votes for. We hope to have all of our candidates tonight, but unfortunately not all could make it. Nonetheless, we are looking forward to a very informative discussion today. And now it's time to introduce tonight's moderator, Rob Batherson, President of the Conservative Party of Canada.
C'est maintenant le temps de vous présenter notre modérateur pour ce soir, Rob Batherson.
It's now time for us to introduce tonight's moderator, Rob Batherson, President of the Conservative Party of Canada. He is a Conservative volunteer involved in the party for over 30 years. He's a representative for Nova Scotia on the Party Council, has been since 2016. He was elected president by his colleagues in 2021. He's also a member of the election organizing committee for this leadership election. Let's welcome Rob Batherson.
Diane, thank you, Rick. Good evening, Conservatives and Canadians, wherever you're watching this debate from coast to coast to coast. On behalf of the Leadership Election Organizing Committee, I'd like to thank the thousands and thousands and thousands of grassroots Conservatives who asked for this debate. And thanks to the generous donors who contributed more than $25,000 to make this an event that pays for itself. We're the Conservatives. We live within our means. It's a wonderful opportunity, and I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to moderate tonight's debate. Our 90-minute program will be split according to Canada's two official languages. The first 45 minutes will be in English. La deuxième partie de 45 minutes sera en français. Minutes will be in English. La deuxième partie de 45 minutes sera en français.
Second part, 45 minutes, will be in French.
Consists of 4 themes for a total of 8 questions. The first 2 questions in each section will be straight question and answer for each of the 3 candidates, with the next 2 questions providing an opportunity for open discussion at the conclusion of the Q&A. At the conclusion of the English section, we will provide 2 minutes to each of the candidates to cover off anything they'd like to add at the midway point of the debate. And once we have finished the 4 questions en français, we will provide an opportunity to each of the leadership candidates to make their closing pitch to members in the official language of their choice. The leadership candidates were informed of the themes in advance, but have not seen the specific questions in advance except for the opening question. A draw by the Leadership Debate Committee involving representatives of participating candidates took place last Thursday to determine the speaking order. I'd like to welcome our candidates participating in tonight's debate, Roman Baber, Scott Aitchison, and Jean Charest. Let's kick things off with our first question, which in many ways is your opening pitch for tonight. All of you have spent the last several months crisscrossing Canada, listening to and speaking with Canadians. What have you learned from Canadians? What's the mood of the country? And based on what you have heard from Canadians, what makes you the best candidate to be the next leader of our party? Again, each candidate will have 3 minutes to answer this question. We'll start with Scott Aitchison, 3 minutes.
Great. Thanks, Rob. I appreciate it. The first thing I would say is that it's been an immense honor and a privilege to travel this country and meet Canadians from coast to coast. There's a lot more that unites us than the partisan bickering that goes on in Ottawa might suggest. But the single biggest thing that I hear Canadians tell me everywhere in this country is that they're actually looking for a government that simply delivers results. They're tired of the photo ops. They're tired of this, the talk, but no real action on a wide range of issues. So how do we Conservatives show that we're ready to lead? We have to show them a real plan, a real principled Conservative plan. At my core, I'm a small town mayor, and I've had to work hard all my career, from municipal council up to mayor up to today, to earn the trust of the people I serve. My campaign for the leadership of the Conservative Party has been about ideas, offering real solutions to the problems that Canadians face every day. And I believe we need to focus on three priorities: making life more affordable, keeping Canada strong and free, and also defending Canadian values. You know, to make life more affordable, we must start by ending the housing crisis. And that's why I talk about implementing my YIMBY plan to get more homes built. We need to lower grocery bills. We need to end supply management. And in the process, we will also get government out of the way and help our farmers sell their products around the world. I'll also end the carbon tax. You know, only a Liberal plan would take your money, hire a bureaucracy to manage it, mail some of it back to you, then ask you to thank them for it. You know, that's not fighting climate change. That's a shell game trying to cover up a tax scheme, another Liberal tax and spend program. And speaking of taxes, they should be simple, predictable, fair, and lower. And so that's my plan to fix Canada's broken tax code, to simplify it. And we need to keep Canada strong and free. We must once again be reliable partners on the world stage. That means investing in our armed forces and meeting our 2% NATO target. It means supporting countries like Taiwan and Israel, who face threats to their democracy every single day. And at home, we need to stop attacking legal gun owners and instead focus on stopping the flow of illegal firearms heading into our country. You know, we have to be frank. To get this election done, to win the next election, to replace Justin Trudeau, we cannot do it unless we're united as a party. And so no matter what happens on September the 10th, we Conservatives need to come together and offer Canadians a principled Conservative message that will retire Justin Trudeau and get this country turned around. You can read more about it in my website at votescott.ca. I want to thank you for tuning in and sharing a few moments with you. I'm looking forward to answering more questions. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Mr. Aitchison. We'll now go to Jean Charest, 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Rob. And I want to start by saying that I'm delighted to be here. And I've accepted every invitation for debates or panels. And I actually thought when this leadership race started that this is fundamental to our responsibility towards the members of the party, to be accountable to them, to answer their questions, to participate in a debate. For a candidate in a leadership race not to participate in the debate is like a fish who says he doesn't want to swim in the ocean. I mean, this is the basic thing that we all need to do and should be accountable for. And I want to commend both Roman and Scott for being here. And Scott, there's a lot of what you've just said that I agree with, and in particular about uniting the party. Because at the end of the day, if we are not united as a party, it's pretty simple. We're not going to be getting the confidence of Canadians. Rob, you talked about the mood of the country, and the mood of the country isn't very good. Our country is more divided today than it has been since I've been involved in public life. And it isn't just east-west, it's intergenerational, it's between urban and rural Canadians, it's also between new Canadians and who now live in a period where they just feel that the federal government is not doing their job. In fact, I've never seen it so bad. The government of Mr. Trudeau can't run a passport office, the airports are a mess, the immigration department is a mess. I mean, there's nothing that's getting done. And yet we pay taxes for all of this, and you'd think that they would have their act together. And there's an urgency to change governments. Canadians want change, and they're looking to us as Conservatives as the alternative. And that's what this race is about, to offer an alternative. I've done exactly that, with policies on defense, policies on environment and resources, policies on daycare, policies that speak to the fundamental issues that our families are facing in this country: affordability, housing, all these things that count for every one of us. But conservatives, if there's one thing I want to say to conservatives that I've heard from every one of you, is that you have had enough of losing. We lost in 15, 19, 21. And it isn't so much that we lose the campaign, well, that the Liberals win. We give it away to them. We have to be the most generous party in the world. Well, if we've had enough of losing, if there's one thing that is now clear in the race at the moment that I am speaking to you now, is that I can win a majority government. And that's what we need. None of the good ideas that Scott has, Roman has, that I will propose in this leadership race will actually mean anything unless we gain the confidence of Canadians in urban areas, in Ontario, in Quebec, in Alberta, and that we work out of the base that we have in Western Canada. In this race, there is one choice. If we want to form government, I ask you to support my leadership. That's what this campaign is all about. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Charest. We don't have any sad trombones in this debate, so I'll ask all of you to indulge me as I keep the order going. Although I did do some trombone in junior high, but no sad trombones here. And we'll turn the floor now over to Mr. Baber. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Rob. Rob, I'm a friendly guy, and over the last few months, I've spoken to thousands of Canadians. Canadians tell me that they're tired of the incompetence of this Liberal government. I practiced law for 12 years before I was elected, and I helped build a small business. So I'm going to bring my private sector skills to create a culture of professionalism and accountability in the federal government. Many Canadians tell me that they're giving up on Canada and then they want to go on their own. I'll extend a hand of friendship to every Canadian in every province to heal our divisions. It doesn't matter who you are or where you live, you'll have a friend and someone who will listen to you in the federal government. And I promise you, many Canadians are telling me that they're not feeling well. That's probably the most important issue that's facing us today. A mental health catastrophe is gripping our nation. Most of us have COVID, and 85% of us are vaccinated. We need to end, and I will end this public health exercise. And going forward, let Canadians make their own choices together with their doctors. We need relief, and we need to move on so we can all heal. I hear from many Canadians how hurt they are by 21st century segregation, how personal choice and basic security of a person were violated. Many Canadians lost their jobs, denied mobility, access to loved one in a hospital. I was the only Conservative fighting this evil before it was cool. I brought a bill in Ontario to stand up for jobs a year ago. I will ban this discrimination and freeze funding to any province that still allows it. People are people. I learned that in law school when I worked at a community legal aid clinic. You have to respect people's choices and people's dignity. Canadians are scared of censorship and government. We're censored in the media, online, by regulators, at work. I lived the first 9 years of my life under a communist regime. My family feared the KGB and taught me not to talk about politics or disclose that we had a prayer book. I got the gift of freedom, and I know how precious and fragile our democracy is. We're free Canadian, and we have the right to be wrong. Speech is the holy grail of all rights, because through speech, we defend all other rights. I'll repeal all of the censorship bills. I'll defend professionals. There is no free speech without free and independent media. I'll free social media, defund the CPC, and end all subsidies and bailouts to the media. I will never silence Canadians, political opponents, or members of Parliament. Finally, Canadians are losing trust in government, but not with me. I got kicked out of the Conservative caucus in Ontario for opposing the lockdowns. I lost my Justice Committee chair, and my loved ones have been put through very hard times. But I fought like hell, every way I knew how, because that's what Canadians expect from us, for our democracy and for our children. I'm always going to say what I believe and do what I believe is right, even when it's unpopular. And that's a principle I'll return to the Conservative Party. Canadians are counting on us. I'd be very humbled to lead our party and our country.
Thank you, Mr. Baber. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll turn now to our next question. Each of you will get 90 seconds to respond. Last week, Pope Francis visited Alberta, Quebec, and Nunavut to apologize to Indigenous people for the horrors of residential schools. As our next Conservative Prime Minister, how will you succeed in restoring trust, respect, and economic opportunity with Indigenous peoples? We'll start with Jean Charest. You have 1 minute, 30 seconds.
Thank you, Rob. This is one of the sad legacies of Mr. Trudeau. He created an incredible expectations about reconciliation. But let's just dwell a moment on one example. He said he would fix the problem of potable drinking water in First Nations, Indigenous communities, and it isn't done. Ladies and gentlemen, I mean, after all 7 years, you think this can't be done? I guarantee you one thing, I'm Prime Minister of this country. It will be done. We will do what we have to do to fix this. It is inadmissible that Canada would accept this. And for Indigenous Canadians, what we need is to help them develop their leadership and an economic base for their communities. One of the things I want to do is a Federal Indigenous Opportunities Corporation. I'm stealing a book out of what Alberta did, so that we offer Indigenous leaders and communities the opportunity to participate in their economic development, not just by receiving royalties or passing on their land, but actually owning equity in projects. That is the kind of change that will be consequential and real for Indigenous Canadians. Same thing for housing. In this leadership race, housing is a big issue. Scott's just raised it. I think Indigenous Canadians should have a program run by them for Indigenous Canadians. That's the kind of real-time leadership that the country needs.
Thank you, Mr. Charest. We'll move now to Roman Baber, 1 minute, 30 seconds.
Thank you. I think we have to be honest and learn from our history so we don't repeat it. But dividing Canadians like Justin Trudeau does actually hurts reconciliation. The best thing we can do for reconciliation is to improve the lives of Indigenous peoples. We still have hundreds of communities in Canada that don't have clean water, and we've been talking about this for 20 years. We can make water out of air now. There are no more excuses. I'm going to get water done by the end of my first term. But there's no improving lives without safety and dignity. Many reserves are experiencing lawlessness and violence. We must protect Indigenous people and especially Indigenous women. We must stop pretending that this isn't happening. We must defend all Canadians, and that means instructing law enforcement to defend Canadians who live on reserves. And generally, let's stop being afraid and start rethinking life on the reserve. Imagine not owning your own property. Imagine being told by a chief that you no longer live in your home and that someone else is now going to occupy your home. I'm not going to pay lip service, and I'm not going to play pretend. I'm going to work with the new generation of Indigenous leaders and Indigenous business leaders to improve the lives and safety of Indigenous Canadians. Home ownership improves communities and the quality of life. Let's get it done.
Thank you, Mr. Baber. We'll now go to Scott Aitchison.
Thanks.
1 minute, 30 seconds.
Thanks, Rob. I would say that this has really been the most important theme of my campaign, is one of respect. And this, I would say, is where our institutions have most failed First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. And you think about the question, relationship. It hasn't been a relationship for generations in this country. It's been a top-down, patriarchal kind of approach. And in some cases, early on, it was about, erasing Indigenous First Nations culture. And so I look at what has gone on, and Jean spoke a little bit about this. In the last 6 years, the Liberals have completed 12 of the 94 recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Report. 12. In 2020, they completed a grand total of 0. And in 2021, when hundreds of unmarked graves were discovered at residential schools, the Liberals completed 3 within the span of a month. So why did it take such a horrible discovery for the Liberals to take action? It's because they don't take action. They're about photo ops and talk and not action. And so as Conservative leader and as Prime Minister, I would start from a position of a real relationship, which is about respect. We know what First Nations people want and what they frankly deserve from what we learned in the Truth and Reconciliation Report. We need to make sure that that relationship is real and we improve the lives of First Nations people everywhere. And as Conservative Party leader, I will get it done.
Thank you, Mr. Aitchison. Thank you, candidates. For the next 2 questions, as a reminder, after our Q&A round for each question, we'll have a 4-minute open discussion period. As moderator, I reserve the right to intervene as appropriate during the 4 minutes to ensure each candidate is given comparable time to speak. Now on to our question. It's harder than ever to travel across Canada. Inner-city bus service has disappeared in many parts of the country. Passenger rail is so inadequate that Canada's Environment Minister was forced to abandon his cross-Canada climate change rail tour. Pearson Airport's a mess, and our major air carriers have reduced service in the peak summer season. As the next Prime Minister, how will you get Canadians moving again? And we'll start with Roman Baber, sir. You have 1 minute, 30 seconds.
Thank you, Rob. There's a very important issue regarding mobility of Canadians that I'd like to address first. It's unthinkable that we still force 15% of Canadians to detain themselves under threat of jail every time they enter and exit Canada. Mobility rights are not just charter rights, they're human rights. The passports do not prevent the spread of COVID, and we need to end the shameful episode in our nation's history. And no new normal in mobility. Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino said that the federal government now sees a use for the ArriveCan app beyond the pandemic. This is exactly what many of us have feared. The tools that were created, that were developed to keep Canadians safe from COVID, will remain post the pandemic and will form a new surveillance state. I will not allow Canada to turn into a surveillance state. A free and democratic society does not hinder entry and exit of its citizens. Next, I'm in favor of massive transit in the GTA. I represented a North Toronto riding, and we should not be afraid to talk about issues that are important to folks in the GTA. It's good for the economy, it's good on our balance sheet, it's easy to finance and will spur economic growth, and it's good for housing. And the best thing we can do for housing is build more roads. Building roads encourages the construction of new and affordable communities. I'm going to start building roads again in Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Baber. We'll move now to Scott Aitchison. 1 minute, 30 seconds. The floor is yours, sir.
Thanks, Rob. Well, there's no question that we've all heard the horror stories at Pearson Airport, where things are a disaster, where our airlines, whether it's passport lines that people can't get a passport in this country because again the Liberals just can't get the job done. Whether it's Nexus lines, where Canadians pay huge fees for air travel and rail travel, and it's not really a great service to begin with. But I think what matters even more than this issue, frankly, and I really think it's the most important issue that Canadians face today, is social mobility and upward social mobility. And I'm pivoting back to the importance of housing, because there are an awful lot of Canadians in this country who can't even dream of the idea of taking a flight somewhere because they don't have a warm bed to sleep in at night. And to me, that is the great crime that this government, this Liberal government, has promised billions and billions of dollars over the last 7 years, and the situation has gotten worse. The CMHC has told us the situation is actually worse. And so I've said many times, if promising billions of dollars could solve the problem, we'd have a housing surplus in this country, and we don't. And so while it's important to clean up the mess and actually get services working for Canadians so they can travel again and we can move around this country, the most important issue facing us, frankly, is making sure that every Canadian has a warm, safe bed to sleep in at night, and I will get that done.
Thank you, Mr. Aitchison. Jean Charest, you now have 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Thank you, Rob. Transport is one of the key drivers of our economy. And it is about the simple idea of moving from one place to the other, but it's about productivity, it's about an economy that works, it's about the ability of Canadians to actually get to their place of work and get back home and do it efficiently. We live in a federal system of government. There is a role, and if we're going to get this job done, at airports, it's sad. All of us are traveling these days. I mean, it has become a nightmare. Who would have thought Mr. Trudeau wanted us to be one of the best countries in the world, that we'd rank among the best? Well, we actually rank among the highest in the world for the worst airports. Pearson Airport. And airports, Rob, is the entry point of any given country. Who would have thought we'd be a country that you can visit for a week and leave your luggage here for 2 weeks? I don't think that's exactly what we want. And I can guarantee you I'll do better.
Thank you, Mr. Charest. We'll move now to our 4 minutes of open discussion, and I'll invite Roman Baber to get us started. Mr. Baber.
Thank you. Look, if we learned anything from the Rogers outage a couple of weeks ago, is the terrible state of our federally regulated industries, we have a complete mess because we have 3 phone companies, 2 airlines, and 5 banks. There's absolutely no reason to continue to defend this antiquated regime or any of those antiquated institutions. No, we need more competition to get them off their backs and working again. So I propose that we allow for more competition, and that includes competition in airlines. British Airways lands in Toronto on its way to Vancouver. There's no reason why I can't hop on it and pay less. So I propose to remove barriers to entry and encourage competition. Attract new players, no more protectionism. It'll be good for the economy, it'll be good for jobs, it'll be good for the consumer and good for prices. I'm going to free these federally regulated industries and get Canadians moving again.
Mr. Acheson, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would completely agree with what Roman has said. We do need more competition. It's amazing to me in this country how much we have traded away for exceptional service for some sort of nationalism around, our own airlines and that kind of thing. But, the bigger issue for me for the airlines and for the airports, frankly, is that in a lot of other countries, they see airports as economic development tools and drivers. Here in Canada, we see them as cash cows. So the Ministry of Transportation just charges them huge rents. And that's crippling the airports. And we should see them as massive economic development drivers, not just for tourism, but for trade around the world. We're a trading nation, and these are the major ports that we get goods in and out of this country. And so we should see them as economic development tools, not as cash cows. And frankly, we need to create a culture of accountability in these government agencies. That's the problem in Ottawa in general, is that there's not a culture of accountability and results. And that's what a Conservative government led by me would deliver.
Mr. Charest.
Something's terribly wrong in this country, Rob. It's passports, airports, Department of Immigration. The government's not working. It's not delivering services. By the way, when you go to the airport and you buy a ticket to travel somewhere, you actually pay fees. You, as a citizen, you pay for the services that you're supposed to get at the airport. It doesn't happen for free, and you're not getting those services. So the next federal government has to get serious about this and give real direction to how airports should be administered, with accountability, with benchmarks on service that you receive. For example, on ArriveCan, we should do away with the first day that we form the government. There's enough bureaucracy at the airport. We don't need to layer it on. So these are things that we should do. I'm also a big believer, Rob, in using the train service. I think one of the lost opportunities in this country for years has been an opportunity for us to develop a rail service across the country that's much more efficient, of faster trains. We could actually connect to the United States, do things with them that would allow us to change the cities of Canada, change the way that we travel. But for that to happen, we need a federal government that has a vision and gets serious about this.
Okay, Mr. Charest, we got 40 seconds. Mr. Baber or Mr. Acheson, either you want to dive in?
I think a lot of what's happening right now at the airports, at the passport office, is a self-inflicted wound. We know that this government is so determined, it's so intent to pursue misguided COVID ideological response that is no longer based in science. It creates friction at our airports, at our passport offices, in our healthcare, and everything and everywhere else. We need to end and go back to normal. It'll immediately give us relief.
Let's give Mr. Acheson a few seconds there.
Yeah, it's a classic situation. We have a Liberal government that believes that the government should be and do and be all things to all people, and it's simply not the case. Conservatives know that if you introduce competition, you can actually improve services.
Thank you, Mr. Acheson. Great discussion, candidates. We'll move now to our next question. Conservative Party members oppose a carbon tax, but Conservatives are also committed to action on climate change. Both statements are included in the party's policy declaration, and groups like Conservatives for Clean Growth are calling for a stable, credible, long-term net zero climate plan. My question is, can we have a net zero climate plan while maintaining the party's opposition to a carbon tax? Scott Acheson, the floor is yours for the next 1 minute, 30 seconds.
And the simple answer to that question, Rob, is yes, we can. For 7 years, Justin Trudeau and the Liberals have missed every single climate target they've set. And what's worse, they've just sought to divide Canadians by attacking our energy sector. We are a resource superpower, this country, and all they've done is attack our resources. Conservatives will do better. We can do better. My plan to fight climate change and protect the environment will actually get the job done. If I become Conservative leader and Prime Minister, here's what we'll do. We will have an infrastructure resilience plan to help Canadians deal and adapt with the extreme weather events. Climate change is here, and we need to invest before disaster strikes, not after. We will lower industrial emissions by making the biggest polluters pay. We will phase out coal and densify our cities and invest in technology, not taxes. We will focus on nuclear power, carbon capture technology. We'll get the job done. Canadians need to see this as an opportunity. If Canada was wiped away from the face of the earth tomorrow, it would have a negligible impact on climate change and the carbon output on the planet. So we need to do our bit, but also make sure that we are selling this innovative and entrepreneurial technology to the world to help the rest of the world reduce their footprint as well. We have the tools, we have the skill set, we have the know-how. Let's sell it to the world.
Thank you, Mr. Aitchison. We'll turn now to Jean Charest, 1 minute, 30 seconds.
Thank you, Rob. One of the keys to us forming a national government is having a credible plan on the environment, resources, and climate. If we don't have that, we will not be elected, period. And by the way, a slogan is not a climate plan. And you can't tax your way into reducing carbon emissions. That is not a plan either. I would do away with Mr. Trudeau's carbon tax on consumers because it hurts rural Canadians, it hurts small and medium-sized businesses. What I would do is a comprehensive approach, and it includes carbon capture and storage, hydrogen, whether blue or green, biofuels, small modular reactors. These are all the areas in which Canada can develop expertise. There's 4 provinces working together on small modular reactors that include Saskatchewan, Alberta, Ontario, and New Brunswick. We can lead the world in this, and if we do it, we'd actually assist the oil patch by allowing them to have a different source of energy than natural gas to be able to draw the bitumen and the oil that we should sell around the world as a reliable and ethical supplier. The world in Ukraine has reminded us that had we assumed our responsibilities, had we been wiser and had a prime minister who had some leadership, that we would actually be able to go out there and supply energy to Europe instead of watching Europeans finance Russia to invade Ukraine. We can do this and have a levy on big producers. That's the approach that Canada needs.
You'll have some time during the open discussion. We'll move now to Roman Baber, 1 minute, 30 seconds.
I'm going to take a different approach, Rob. I was not afraid to take on the radical COVID mob, and I will not be afraid to take on the radical left-wing environmental mob. We should not, as Conservatives, be afraid about talking about the environment. We know that Canada produces less than 1.5% of all global emissions, and there is no certainty that even if you were to cut all of those emissions, that would make a material difference in the climate. We know who the polluters are. They're in China, they're in Russia, they're in India. And the Paris Accord does not hold them anywhere near to the same standard as Canada is held to. So I'm going to reframe this conversation. Canada is blessed with so much forest that much of our greenhouse gases are actually naturally absorbed, and we don't get credit for that under the Paris Accord. And I do not believe that taxing Sally $10 at the gas pump every time she fills up her car is actually going to affect the global climate. I don't think that many people actually believe that anymore. And I think that many Canadians agree with me on this topic. So I will not impose a regressive tax that only serves to punish Canadians. However, I would like to look at planting more trees. Right now, we're planting about 360 million trees a year. I would look to increase that to 500 million a year. I love trees. I love Canadian forest. Let's try to capture most of our emissions naturally.
Thank you, Mr. Baber. We'll open up our 4 minutes of discussion and ask Scott Aitchison to get us started. Mr. Aitchison.
Thanks, Rob. And I guess I'd like to challenge my colleagues a little bit here. We're very friendly, we all get along, but I think it's important to challenge. And And I appreciate where Roman comes from on this issue and what you said, Roman. But at the same time, you know, my comments about, you know, marketing technologies to the rest of the world to help them reduce their footprint is important as well. And I think it's important that, you know, why don't you acknowledge that we can see this as an opportunity for businesses and entrepreneurs in Canada. And I want to challenge Jean as well, because Jean, you talked about the importance of having a climate change plan and a policy that if we don't have that, we will not actually be elected as the next government. But unity is also really important as well within our party. And so I want to challenge you, Jean, because there's been a lot of talk about what happens after this. If I don't win or you don't win, what happens? We have to come together as a party after this is over, whoever the leader is, and work together. Will you be part of that? Will you continue to work together as a Conservative with the team, whoever the leader is, and help bring the party together?
But Scott, do you disagree with me that this is a key issue for us being elected?
Absolutely it is.
It is. Okay, well then we agree on that.
We agree.
We need a credible plan. And by the way, Conservatives should, you know, take some credit for our history in dealing with these issues. Rob, we actually gave birth to the most credible, the most effective environmental treaty in the world, the Montreal Protocol on reducing CFCs and HCFCs, which, by the way, contains economic instruments. We're the government that actually did the Clean Air Act of the United States to reduce SO2 emissions. That also includes economic mechanisms. So my proposal is taking a book out of the page of what Alberta does with a levy on large emitters, which are the most effective ones to be able to deal with this. And by the way, this is what the oil patch agrees with, so that we're able to reach zero emissions by 2050 and do it in a smart way. And we should, you know, look at what Europe's doing. After Glasgow, Europe has actually proposed a transitional period that includes natural gas and nuclear. Well, Canada needs to be smart about this, and we can be smart about it. And if you follow what's being done in Alberta, the positions taken in the energy industry, they actually agree with this approach. This is the smart approach that will get the job done, and you know what? We'll also gain the support of Canadians and elect a national Conservative government.
Thank you, Mr. Charest. Mr. Baber.
Thank you, Rob. Look, Scott, of course I'm in favor of new and advanced technologies. I just want to make sure that the taxpayer is not holding the bag. We've seen that happening in Ontario with the former Kathleen Wynne and previously the McGuinty government. That would finance all sorts of green technologies. For instance, there were a lot of solar panels that were costing us about 70 cents a kilowatt of hydro, but the market rate was about 7 cents. And so Ontarians were held holding the difference and paying the difference, and that's what created this remarkable green energy debt that Ontarians are now settled with. Second of all, what I'm against is imposing on Canadians a way of life that they do not want to live. And I do not believe that Canadians should be made to drive less or to farm less, especially farm less. We have a global insecurity in food. We have a global food shortage. And you know, there's a lot of joking going around with a plant outside of London, Ontario, and 4 million crickets. And I'm not eating crickets. I think that we should be able to farm not less, we should farm more. And we should also, in order for us to get out of the economic mess that we're in, we need to turn Canada into natural resources superpower that we ought to be, instead of hindering our manufacturing of natural resources.
Well, do I look like a guy who eats crickets? You know? Well, I do want to say I would do away with the Trudeau carbon tax on consumers and also repeal C-48 and C-69. These two very important.
Thank you very much, Mr. Charest. And I don't think there are any crickets at home, whether eating or people watching. Very good discussion amongst our three candidates. To wrap up our English language section of the debate, I'm now ask each of the three participating candidates to share any additional comments they wish members to hear before we move to the French language section of the debate. Each of you will get 2 minutes, and we'll begin with Scott Aitchison.
Thanks, Rob. You know, our answer to Justin Trudeau's divisive politics cannot be more division. We must lead with respect. We have to offer real solutions to the challenges Canadians face every day and produce a government that actually delivers results. We can't be the party that just rails against government. We have to be the party that offers better government, that actually respects taxpayer dollars and delivers results. We also have to come together as conservatives. I would point out in the last little discussion there that Roman answered my question, but Jean did not, about what happens after this leadership race. We have to come together. Whoever the leader of the party is on September the 11th, every one of us must come together. And I challenge every candidate in this race to stand up and say that they will come together. They will work with the conservative movement, whoever the leader is, work with our team in Ottawa to make sure that we are united, that we are presenting a conservative, principled conservative, consistent message, and that we defeat Justin Trudeau in the next election. We simply cannot do it unless we are united. Canadians are frustrated. They are looking for an alternative. Justin Trudeau didn't win the last election. We lost it. We have to do better. Canadians deserve better government. Canadians deserve better from us. And so I encourage you, look at my plan. I talk about real solutions that actually present solutions to the problems that Canadians face every single day. Not just taglines, not just talk, not just Justin Trudeau style photo ops, but real solutions. Check out votescott.ca. You can read all about it there, and no matter what happens on September the 10th, I commit that as conservatives, I will work as a member of the team, as a member of Parliament, I will work with our team to bring our caucus together, to bring our movement together, and to make sure that we defeat Justin Trudeau in the next election. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aitchison. Roman Baber, you now have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Rob. My dear Canadians, I'm optimistic because the media is turning on Justin Trudeau. And many of his ministers are now on the ropes, and Canadians are tired of this unscientific COVID response and the divisive tone that the Prime Minister insists on. I personally cannot wait for the next general election. I never wanted to win an election this badly because, frankly, our country is at stake. And I hear all this talk about division in our party and people that are not on the leadership ballot talking about alternatives. It saddens me immensely. So I want you to imagine a scenario. It's the day after the election and you wake up and Justin Trudeau is re-elected Prime Minister. Or even worse, Chrystia Freeland is Prime Minister now. Not good, right? Well, we're counting on each other to make sure that this does not happen. And that means that we must stick together for the sake of our nation. We all need to take a step back, take a deep breath, simmer down. Our party is almost 700,000 members strong. It's a credit to every leadership contestant in this race. On September 10th, I will stretch out all 5.5 inches of me to embrace and unite this party, regardless of who wins. And I'm counting on each one of my friends to come along and do the same. And I also want to ask you to rank me first. There's no vote splitting as long as you mark another candidate second. If I don't win, then once I fall off the ballot, your vote will go to your second choice. You will still get the result that you like. But no, it doesn't work the other way around. If you mark me second, I may not get your vote if your unless your first choice finishes last. So please mark me first to reject the COVID policies of the last 2 years. Please mark me first to send a message to the Conservative Party that must stand on principle even when it's difficult. And mark me first to have a strong democratic movement
movement.
Thank you, Mr.
within our
Baber.
party. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baber. Jean Charest, you now have 2 minutes.
Roman Baber, Scott Aitchison, and I all agree on one thing. If we are going to unite the party, you have to show up. You actually have to show up. You have to speak to the membership. You can't treat them with contempt. At this point in the leadership race, about close, maybe 25% of members have voted. 75% of you have not yet cast your ballot. This is the moment where you are the one who should be holding us accountable on what it is that we're proposing in terms of leadership. I've led caucuses federally. I've done it in a province, and I've done it successfully. I have a track record of uniting. And this party, if there's one thing this party has to sort out, more than anything else, because we paid a high price for it in 19 and 21, a very high price, and now the country's paying a high price for it, is getting our party organized and united. I will do that. I know how to do it. It's what I've done all my life. And if we are able to do that, well, then that's the first condition to uniting the country. This country is crying out for our leadership. There is a boulevard out there of Canadians who want a fiscally conservative government who's going to have a real economic plan for the country, and also understands that we can't get big projects done. We can't get pipelines done. We can't get energy projects done unless there's a national government. And it would be a breath of fresh air, ladies and gentlemen, to actually have a prime minister in Canada who lives outside of the Ottawa bubble, whether it's the media or it's the political parties or the bureaucracy, and actually understands how this country works, respects the provinces, respects his own party members, and is able to make this country work to the benefit of all Canadians.
Thank you, Mr. Charest. This brings to a close the English language section of the debate, although candidates will be free to give their closing statements in the official language of their choice after the French language section of the debate. Mesdames et messieurs, après cette courte pause de 30 secondes.
Ladies and gentlemen, after a brief 30-second pause, we will begin the French language debate. Thank you. won the popular vote. What are the most important things that you can do as leader of the Conservative Party in the first 100 days to put our party on the right path to victory, on track to victory? Mr. Jean Charest, 1.5 minutes. Thank you. I would also like to welcome Roman Baber and Scott Aitchison, who are here tonight. They both believe strongly in democracy, as I do. And out of respect to you, members, it's good that we're here to defend our ideas in a public forum. That is the crux of what we will have to do after the leadership race is done. The first job I will have as leader is to do that. In 2019, 2021, we were divided. Canadians didn't elect the Liberal Party. We practically handed them the election. Millions of Canadians want a government that is fiscally conservative, that has a clear economic plan, that can lead the country, and that can put major projects in place. So the first 100 days as the new leader will be focused on party unity, on working with activists to prepare the election campaign. This is a minority government, and we might find ourselves facing an election very quickly. I have campaigned in federal elections, in provincial elections successfully, but we need a leader who is ready to do that and who's ready from day one. I am the person who can unite the party and who can unite the party so we can unite the country. Thank you, Mr. Roman Baber. 90 seconds. Thank you. As Prime Minister, I would bring together a team of competent people to bring back a culture of professionalism to the government. This is something we owe every Canadian so that we can also try to reduce our regional divisions. We need to get life back to normal. Canadians can make their own medical decisions in consultation with their doctors. The vaccine is not preventing transmission and must be an individual choice, the COVID-19 vaccine, that is. I would end the vaccine mandate across the country. This is the greatest threat to our democracy. I would eliminate funding for Radio-Canada, CBC Radio-Canada, and I would not have government support for media. I would abolish the carbon tax and the anti-pipeline legislation so that we can transform our country into a natural resource superpower. I would also open a legal investigation because we need a competent government that's responsible and that works for every Canadian. Thank you, Mr. Baber. The next answer will be by Mr. Scott Aitchison. 1 minute, 30 seconds, please. My priority for the first 100 days as leader will be practically the same as yours, gentlemen. We need to remember that Justin Trudeau could call an election at any time. Not necessarily because he's worried about me, but we need to unite the party. We have no choice but to do that. Secondly, we have to appoint a campaign team and take the best organizers from all of our own campaigns who have shown how competent they are. We will need a committee that includes both a caucus and a party members. My priority for the first 100 days of a Conservative government would be to invite all premiers to improve the healthcare system in Canada, to put in place measures that would put an end to supply management, because, of course, that needs to go, but we need to get something back from the Americans. We need to make public our plan to eliminate the deficit and restore confidence to investors and Canadians. Lastly, we need to make sure that we implement measures for IMBY to work in my backyard. Thank you. Canadians living in our rural communities often feel excluded from government decisions. Everywhere we look, we see that, be it high-speed internet that's lacking, or the policies of the Trudeau government in rural communities. Farmers need fertilizer, for example. How would you make sure that rural areas will have the attention they need under your leadership? Mr. Roman Baber, you have a minute and 30 seconds. The best thing we can do to improve opportunities in rural Canada is to have work and jobs there. The policies of the Liberal government are preventing workers from benefiting from agriculture and natural resources. There is a lack of food worldwide, but Justin Trudeau wants to reduce agriculture and farming. We need to do the opposite. We need to encourage farming for export. We need to feed Canadians and export food. I believe that our natural resources are a blessing, and I will not allow petroleum and gas to be cancelled. Mining operations are important too. People in the world needs precious metals, and I would make it possible for our mining industry to operate responsibly. This would be tremendous for communities in the north, for Indigenous people, and it is the only way to make sure that roads and infrastructure are built in regions where they're needed. This will bring opportunities to rural areas. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Baber. Mr. Scott Aitchison, 1 minute, 30 seconds. I am a member of Parliament, and I represent a rural riding. So I'm well aware of rural Canada's reality. Rural Canada has been forgotten by Justin Trudeau's Liberals. They promised billions for high-speed internet in remote regions, and yet this contemporary infrastructure is embarrassingly slow to be deployed and is simply not available in too great a number of communities. Rural areas need internet just like people in the cities do. The housing crisis in small rural communities is also just as serious than it is in the cities, and the millions and billions promised by Justin Trudeau's government haven't materialized. There is a serious crisis in rural Canada. Grocery bills are out of control, and supply management is making food prices increase. Supply management needs to go, because that would make it possible to restore family farms in rural areas. I can assure you that my housing plan will also cover small towns across Canada. I would eliminate Justin Trudeau's carbon tax that weighs on consumers and encourage Canadians to reduce their carbon footprint. Thank you. Mr. Jean Charest, you have 1 minute and 30 seconds. Thank you. This really is one of the major issues for the Canadian economy. We need rural areas so that Canada can prosper. We must never forget that the mining sector, which is mostly located in Quebec, provides thousands of jobs, and indirectly more thousands in Montreal, Toronto, Calgary, and we really need to see the link between mining and jobs. We need to support rural areas. I have always supported the natural resources sector. The plan I have put forward for the North shows that clearly. But that's not the only issue. We also need high-speed internet, health services. There was an article on Fubu Island in the Maritimes. There's no doctor on the island. the availability of doctors is paramount. When I was in government, I did something that worked very well. Sherbrooke University opened a branch in Moncton and was training doctors in the community, and they stayed in the community. We could do that. And we've done the same thing in the Saguenay. But to achieve this, we need a government that can think broadly enough and can put forward solutions like that instead of just taxing people in rural areas, which is what Mr. Trudeau's government is doing. Thank you. As I said in English, for the next 2 questions, there will be an open debate at the end of the question and answer session. As moderator, I reserve the right to ensure that all candidates have equal time during the open debate. Here's the question. Inflation is the highest it's been in 40 years. Interest rate increases are the strongest tool the Bank of Canada has to fight persistent inflation. However, high interest rates have a cost on people's mortgages and household expenditure. In your view, what are the best measures the government can take to make life more affordable for Canadians? Mr. Scott Aitchison, 1 minute and 30 seconds, please. First of all, there is no miracle solution to fight inflation. You can't fire a government employee, and it's a real challenge, needing a real solution as well as budgetary discipline. As leader of the Conservative Party, my top priority will be to make life more affordable for all Canadians. We will eliminate the carbon tax. We would save money, consumers would save money on gasoline and heating. By eliminating supply management, we will prevent the prices of foods like eggs, milk, and chicken from increasing. My plan will build more housing and make housing more affordable. There is a housing crisis in this country. Housing prices have doubled since Justin Trudeau was first elected. We will considerably increase the housing supply in Canada. We will restore a balanced budget. And once we've done that, we will start bringing down your taxes, paying back the debt, and that will make life more affordable for Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Aitchison. Mr. Jean Charest, you have 1 minute and 30 seconds. That is the subject that most people in the party talk about. Inflation, access to housing, property. There's no miracle solution. We do need to bring down government spending because government spending increases inflation. We know that. The Bank of Canada should have started increasing interest rates earlier. It should have started around the end of January. That is what I believe. The other policy consideration would be to reduce personal income tax. That's what I did during the 2008-2009 recession, because that makes it possible for people to have more money in their pockets. It increases their disposable income. Scott Aitchison wants to eliminate supply management. I want to make it clear that I support supply management. If you're a party member who's directly affected by supply management, I think you'll find in me the only candidate who will support it, especially in a period where supply chains are breaking down. In my view, stability for Canada's rural sector and the people living in it is paramount. Scott, you would eliminate supply management and negotiate something for it with the U.S. Mr. Charest, there will be an open debate where you can elaborate on that. We will now ask Mr. Roman Baber to speak. You have 1 minute and 30 seconds, Mr. Baber. Thank you. It is important for us to recognize what is at the root of this inflation. It's not just the $2.5 billion that we have borrowed in the last year. It is the lockdowns that have made our economy grind to a halt. The supply chain has been halted worldwide a number of times, and our economy simply can't meet demand. Now, what can we do to fight inflation? We need to provide stability in the markets. I will never stop the economy. I will never go back to lockdown. I will restore discipline in government, abolish the carbon tax from the very first day. I will also bring down income tax. We need to do everything we can to make life more affordable for Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Baber. We will now move to the open debate, 4 minutes on this topic. Mr. Aitchison, please begin. Mr. Charest, if we put an end to supply management, grocery bills would be lower, and there would be new opportunities for Canadian farmers. I'm talking about opportunity. But the main issue now is housing. If you don't have the means to buy a house today, you probably or perhaps will never be able to. And that urgently needs to change. That is why I have a YIMBY plan, yes, in my backyard. Scott, your position on supply management has been very clear, as is mine. And I'm happy to talk about it with people in your riding and in Quebec to see exactly what it would cost to put an end to supply management. You say you'd abolish it and then negotiate with the Americans. Well, if you abolish it, what's your leverage then? Supply management provides for stability in supply and stable prices and gives people in the regions a stable source of revenue on the ability to purchase property. We need to look at urban development and build more housing. We need to encourage immigrants who have skills in the building trade to come to Canada and build. We need to encourage more higher density housing. We need to work with the provinces and municipalities to move ahead so that we can provide incentives. One thing I would do is to establish a capital gains hiatus, a pause in capital gains for people who sell housing, provided that they reinvest those funds in housing. This would make it possible for us to catch up on building more homes. Thank you, Mr. Charest. Mr. Baber, do you have anything else to add? All right. We'll move to the last question. Over 5 million Canadians cannot get care from a health professional. The provinces and territories have united in asking the federal government to invest more in health care. What role can the federal government play in dealing with the health care crisis? We'll begin with Mr. Jean Charest, 1 minute, 30 seconds. Thank you, Rob. As a subject, as a topic, this is certainly a top priority for Canadians. It was bad before COVID, and now it's worse. As Prime Minister, in the first 100 days of my government, I would bring together all premiers in a federal, provincial, territorial meeting, in a meeting co-chaired by the premiers, and health would be number one on the agenda. We'd also talk about housing, the economy, all the major themes that we have to deal with together if we are to come up with solutions. I would allow the provinces to innovate. I would allow the private sector to play a role, but let's be careful. They would have a role within the framework of a public system. You would not be asked to pay more. Let's be clear. We would simply allow private clinics, for example, who do hip and knee surgery to provide those surgeries effectively at a better price so that we can remove some patients from hospitals where they don't need to be and provide more intensive care. The federal government can provide a platform that makes us draw talent to Canada and qualify foreign-trained immigrants. And yes, the federal government should participate in federal, provincial, territorial meetings instead of turning its back. Mr. Baber, 1 minute, 30 seconds. We do have a healthcare crisis. Emergency rooms around the country are in difficulty because of a shortage in staff. We need to change what we're doing. We pulled off a lot of healthy workers from wards and hospitals because they did not want to be vaccinated. All employees have to be allowed to come back to work. We need to recognize that Canada has the most inefficient healthcare system in the developed world. We have fewer beds per capita than any other OECD country. So I would invest in building hospitals, and that is something I would discuss with the provinces and territories. Thank you, Mr. Baber. Mr. Scott Aitchison, you have 1 minute and 30 seconds. Thank you. We have a fragile healthcare system. We think we have a great system because it's better, for example, than that in the US, and we think that it means we have the best system in the world, but we don't. We should not be afraid of debating the issue, and we should examine other models that are effective in other countries, like the one in the Netherlands. The system we have here was based on a promise that the federal government would provide and cover 50% of healthcare costs, but it doesn't. Today, the federal government pays only 20% of costs. There is no easy answer to this, but we have to discuss the issue and work with provinces and territories to improve our healthcare system. We can work with the provinces to increase capacity in our hospitals, reduce waiting times, and increase the number of beds available. We need to find means of spending less on managing healthcare and more on actually providing it to patients. Thank you, Mr. Aitchison. Let's now move to the 4 minutes of open debate. Mr. Charest, you begin. Our healthcare system needs to be overhauled, and it is more than urgent for us to talk to the provinces and fix it. The problem we had was a capacity issue. Why does Canada, and why did Canada impose the most stringent measures in the world? Because we needed to do that. We have to work closely with the provinces. And that's what I've done. The most significant agreement on health was signed when Stephen Harper was in opposition. We were increasing funding by 6% a year. We had in that agreement recognition of asymmetric federalism and full compliance with provincial areas of jurisdiction. The premiers got together and basically asked Mr. Trudeau, who's missing in action, to respond to their province, their demands demands, and what are we getting? Radio silence. Then he seems prepared to increase funding with strings attached. But, you know, let's worry about something. A government that can't manage a passport office, I doubt very much could manage emergency rooms. And if that is Mr. Trudeau's intent, let's make sure that we can get to a point where a Conservative government is elected, a government that can run the country properly. Mr. Baber? We have a labor shortage. We need to hire all Canadians who are willing and able. We need more workers in the healthcare system and a greater focus on healthcare. We must never be in a position where there is a lack of equal access to medical care and healthcare in general. I would reform the Canada Health Act to protect each and every Canadian's medical choices. Thank you, Mr. Baber. Mr. Aitchison? No, I'm done. Thank you. Thank you. We all agree that there is a labor shortage, a staffing shortage in the healthcare centre. People are exhausted. We know they're heroes. Nurses, doctors have been exceptional. But here's what the federal government can do. There can be a specific immigration plan, a platform to recruit immigrants who are specialized in some areas of healthcare, nurses, physicians, support staff, and make sure that their qualifications can be recognized. That is under provincial jurisdiction. But if we had a creative approach, we could establish a common platform across all provinces and territories to recognize people's qualification and make it easier and faster for people to come to the country and work in healthcare. Thank you, Mr. Charest. Thank you, gentlemen. Candidates now have a last opportunity to speak to their voters in the language of their choice.
Candidates participating in the language of their choice to give one last pitch to Conservative Party members. And I know there's lots of discussion in the party about organizers and the Leadership Election Organizing Committee that crack down on candidates and impose all sorts of sanctions or penalties. But we do nice things for leadership candidates as well. So we have some extra time, and so we're going to provide an extra minute to each of the three candidates to make their final closing pitch to members. 4 minutes chacun, 3 minutes, 4 minutes each. Commençons avec Monsieur Scott Aitchison.
Thanks, Rob. Canadians are so frustrated with this government. They are looking for a credible alternative. And the majority of Canadians are just fed up with Justin Trudeau. But we must earn their respect as Conservatives and be united if we are to form the next government. We're not going to win in places like the island of Montreal, the lower mainland of BC, Atlantic Canada, the GTA around Toronto, unless we are addressing the real concerns of Canadians who live in these areas, and all Canadians, regardless of their religion or ethnicity, see themselves reflected in our Conservative Party. That's why I have led by offering real solutions to today's challenges. Mes critiques diront que mon français n'est pas assez bon.
Some would say my French is not good enough. It's true. But I will continue to work on this. I'm going to redouble my efforts. And I promise that between now and the next election, I will be fluent in English and French.
Whether or not I win this race, as a proud member of the party in Parliament, I will continue to serve in the House of Commons and stand up for the values that we fought for in this leadership campaign. Can the others say the same tonight? Jean, I asked you earlier, you've given a lot to this country. But you didn't answer the serious question about your leadership and your dedication to the party if you don't win. Our party, our team, must be committed. And our members must be focused on uniting our party and dedicated to its future, offering real solutions. Can you honestly say that if you do not win this race, that you will be here on September 11th helping Leslyn, Pierre, and me unite our party? I will continue to be a part of the Conservative team, fighting in Ottawa to hold Justin Trudeau to account and always looking for ways to deliver results that makes the lives of Canadians better. That's what I've always done in public life. Canadians deserve so much better from their federal government. And frankly, Canadians deserve better from us. Justin Trudeau did not win the last election. We lost it because we didn't get our act together. We have to do it this time, and we have to come together. This leadership campaign has been divisive and in sometimes cases embarrassing. We have to come together, and we must unite as a team, as a caucus, as a movement, and present a clear, principled, consistent conservative message to Canadians and speak to the issues that matter to Canadians in all parts of the country, not just our rural base. We have to address issues that matter to Canadians where we have not won in the last several elections. And we can't do that if we're fighting amongst ourselves. I will lead our team by bringing it together, and working with that team, we will build that principled, inclusive, and positive conservative platform that will deliver results for Canadians from coast to coast to coast. I ask for your help to make this happen. When you cast your ballot, please vote Scott Aitchison number 1. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Aitchison. We turn now to Robin Baber, 4 minutes.
Thank you, Rob. I'm going to abandon the notes and speak from the heart like I typically do. I'm genuinely concerned about the erosion of democracy in our country and, of course, the erosion of opportunity. I came to Canada when I was 15, and we didn't have a cent to our name. My dad sold ice cream on those Dixie bicycles, but I've always had a job, and I've always had this remarkable joy because I had Canadian opportunity. This country has given me every opportunity to work, to go to school, to join a big firm, and then go on my own and join a small firm and grow a small business. It's a remarkable blessing. I've always felt that this is the best country in the world because all you needed to do to succeed in Canada is just work hard and be nice to people. That's it. And if you just did those two things, then everything will be okay. And we get to do that, and we get to keep our religious values and cultural values. We get to be ourselves. This country is such a blessing. And I'm not prepared to let it go. And I'm genuinely worried when I see 15% of Canadians still being treated like second-class citizens, when we see censorship on social media and on the news media, when we see our freedom of speech erode. For what? We know what the line is. Do not, God forbid, incite violence. Do not demonize an identifiable group of people like the Prime Minister does. But short of that, we have the right to be wrong. And whatever happened to, I might disagree with you, but I'll still defend your right to say it. We must preserve our freedom of speech because the freedom of speech is the holy grail of all rights. Because through speech, we defend all of other rights and other Canadians. This is a legacy that we must cherish, our ability to disagree with each other respectfully. I also want to give you a little bit of strategy. A lot of folks ask me, Roman, we can't wait 3 years anymore. What are we going to do with this coalition government? And I say, well, first of all, I don't think we're going to have to wait that long. And if the rumors of a fall election are true, I say bring it on. We can't afford another day of Justin Trudeau. But the key to all of this is Jagmeet Singh. Jagmeet Singh is the weak link. And I hold, and I invite each of you to hold Jagmeet Singh responsible for everything that this Justin Trudeau government does. He knows he's in trouble. He abandoned labor. He knows that he didn't stand up for their jobs. He knows that his organizers on the ground, the union bosses, they did not stand up for labor. And now is an opportunity for us because we are going to stand up for Canadian workers. And finally, I ask that you rank me first because we have to get out of this mess. We have to end this nightmare that we've been living for 2.5 years. There's nothing else. Most of us had COVID. 85% of us are vaccinated. Canadians are suffering from a mental health post-trauma, and they're not going to begin to heal until we move past this public health exercise and just allow ourselves to make our own choices. And it's also very important that history regards everything that happened fairly, that the tactics that were used against Canadians for the first time, like segregation, and psychological manipulation and censorship, that they're not viewed justifiable in the future. Because if somehow history regards them fairly, then we will never get our democracy back, and we will never fully go back to normal. And I find those two propositions unacceptable. We're getting our democracy back, and we're going back to normal, full stop. That's why I'm here, and that's why I ask that you rank me first. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Baber. We'll now move to Jean Charest. The final word, 4 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much. Et Rob, je fais mes remarques à la fois en anglais et en français.
Rob, I'll be commenting in both English and French.
To political life. Leadership is about showing up. Showing up in all circumstances. It's about being accountable to the members of the party, you, the ones who decide who the next leader will be, and answering questions and debating with other candidates. All my life, I've showed up. We were badly defeated in 1993 as the Progressive Conservatives. There was 2 members left. I was the only one reelected. I didn't walk away. I showed up. I stayed to rebuild the party. It's a great sacrifice for which I'm eternally indebted to my wife, Michelle, and the family. But I did it out of conviction. In 95, there was a referendum. I showed up. In 98, there was a call to go fight another referendum in Quebec. I showed up. In 97, we had a federal campaign. We went from 2 to 20 members. I showed up. I showed up at every moment when it was important for the country, when it was important for my party, when it was important for the future of Canada. Leadership is about fighting and showing up. It isn't about running away. In this leadership race, I've met with thousands of Conservatives across the country. By the way, of all stripes and colors. And we're not hyphenated Conservatives. That's not what we want for the future. But there are Conservatives in this party who believe in families, who believe in issues that are faith-based, for example. All of you have a place at the table. I want you to know that. A political party is a living institution. We have shared values. Fiscal conservatism, market-based economy, economic policies that promote economic growth. We believe in families, plural. We also believe, by the way, in law and order, which is fundamental to the freedoms in our society. And none of us have the luxury, by the way, especially if you're a legislator, to go out there and encourage people to break laws. And that doesn't mean that we hinder free speech. Quite to the contrary. Believe me, I've been around long enough and on both sides to know that every single citizen in this country has a right to speak out. And none of us should have been subjugated to what the Trudeau government imposed with the War Measures Act, which became the Emergencies Act. It was quite unbelievable. And Roman, I know you feel strongly about that. You paid a price for it. And that I find to be very admirable. Showing up also means, in the end, uniting this party. There are millions of Canadians who want us as Conservatives to be that national alternative. Now, let me add this. A lot of Canadians are also tired, they're frustrated, some of them are angry. But anger is not a political program. The challenge of real leaders who show up is to take that and to translate that into something positive for the future of the country, to a program, to uniting the party, to unite the country, to make it work, because we know we can do better. Nous pouvons, nous les conservateurs, être justement cet
We can be that instrument of unity. We have been an instrument of unity in the past, and I will unite the party in the future.
Been a conservative, and I believe in conservative values. I led a coalition government in Quebec because, as a conservative, I believed in the unity of this country. I'm not going to change, but I'm going to be the leader of this party. You have a vote, you have a voice, and you have a choice as a member of this party. And I am asking you to support me so that we can do the job we need to do to unite the party and unite the country.
Thank you, Mr. Charest. I want to thank all of our candidates who are participating tonight, Roman Baber, Scott Aitchison, Jean Charest, for being here. On behalf of the Leadership Election Organizing Committee, including the debate committee of Rick Eckstein, Deanne Carey, and Eleanor Miller, I hope tonight's debate has given Conservative Party members who haven't voted More to think about. As of last night, we have received approximately 150,000 ballots. This means that the vast majority of Conservative Party members have yet to vote. To be counted, your ballot needs to be received in Ottawa by September 6th. If you have questions, please go to the party's website, www.conservative.ca, www.conservateur.ca. The results will be announced on September 10th at the Shaw Centre in Ottawa. Please join us either in person at the Shaw Centre in Ottawa on September 10th, or watch the results at home, online, or on your preferred source of news. Please vote. We have set record numbers, 678,000 plus Conservatives eligible to vote, never seen before in Canadian history. Be part of the change. Be part of history to change Canada for the better. No matter how long you have been a member of the Conservative Party, no matter why you joined, no matter who you support in this leadership race, you have a home in this party. Vous êtes chez vous au Parti conservateur du Canada.
You have a home in Canada's Conservative Party. We are stronger when everyone is engaged.
Our next Prime Minister is just a vote away. Good night et bonne soirée.
And so the final Conservative leadership debate has now ended. Andrew Thompson back with you on CPAC, and in a few moments, those hopefuls